Hello, and welcome to this, our 61st live stream, Understanding Hell. There will be a test. This is not so much about hell as in that the hell students go through, where the teacher will always tell them, yes, for today's instruction, there will be a test. Anything will be on it, could be on the test. So it's sort of a teacher joke there. So I want to welcome everyone who decided to join us today. We got some really esteemed people on our live chat today. We've got Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy. We've got Faye of the Duat. We've got Sinaiacus Apologia. We've got M. Scotty, 501 Mobius, Jesse Camping. Wow, we have just got a who's who, Mechatanky Stalinist, all sorts of, ancient Egypt and the Bible celebrities. So, it's been a really eventful week. How can I just go through this? I mean, today this week we did our first shorts. Again, I want to give a shout out here to Inspiring Philosophy, who advised me to do shorts, and so far the reaction has been really positive to it. He gave me some great advice here, and I'm very thankful for that. We did 3 shorts last week. We'll probably do 3 again next week and continue on with that. So, the questions you ask here will probably end up at a short sometime, possibly, if it's short enough. The other thing that's going on is that this Monday, we are having a popcorn review. Okay? It'll be at 8 p.m., not our normal, and it's going to be a premiere, so there's going to be another party. I know, partying on Monday night. Us ancient Egypt and the Bible folk, we just love our parties. So this Monday night, 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, bring your popcorn, whatever you drink for libation, and watch our next popcorn review. And we hope you enjoy it. So with that all said, that's the announcements. We're going to get right into the questions here. Again, the way it works is super chats have priority. They always do, although we do start off with a few non-super chats. Can't hear you. We will start off with a few non-super chats. We also will, if you're not going to be doing a super chat, we ask that you begin your question with a Q and a colon, so I know it's directed at me, because I get there's a lot of chats on the live stream, and I have to pick out what's directed to me versus what's directed to someone else, so I scan for that Q and the colon. When you ask your question, only ask it once. If I see a question on there more than once, I might, I won't answer it. Okay, essentially, we had too much problem in the past with people spamming a question over and over again. So only post your non-super chat question once. And finally, if it happens to deal with a verse in the Bible or a foreign word, tell me where to find that verse so I can look it up. Also, if it is a foreign word, tell me what you think it means and what language it's from. So at least I have some context to go on. And that's because of homonyms, essentially. The same word can sound similar to many words across many languages. So I need that sort of additional context to help figure out. So anyway, with that said, let's get into the questions. It looks like it's going to be a great night. So here we're going to start off with 4 non-super chats. Our first non-super chat is, my video froze. Not good. What happened here? I know what happened here. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, this will be just a second as I try to fix the video. The video. Replug in the video. Get that properties back up. And it looks like my video driver has died. That is not good. Oh, that looks like exactly what happened. Video driver died on me. Oh, that's nice. Alright, looks like it's back. I'm just gonna have to tweak a few settings, and then we are good to go. Yeah, it takes me a little while to set this up, so just a moment till we're back on the air. At least it looks like it's recovered. That's a huge thing. Okay. Let's see if we are back in the land of living. We are back in the land of living. Awesome. Okay. Apparently, Messianic Jewish summer camp isn't the only place where it's hard to tell the living from the dead. Okay. We can begin. Cambrit asks, can you explain Leviticus 21:16 to 21? Why would a blemish be a violation of sacred space? All right, let's pull that passage up and take a look at it. So, Leviticus 21. And starting at 16. All right, we'll pull up our Bible here. And the text reads, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron, saying, No man of your offspring through the generations who has a defect shall approach to offer bread to his God. For no one who has a defect shall approach a blind man, a lame man, or he who has disfigured face or a deformed limb, or a man who has a broken foot or a broken hand, a hunchback, a dwarf, or one who has a defect in his eye, eczema, scabs, or a crushed testicle. No man among the descendants of Aaron, the priest who has defect, is to come near to offer the Lord's offerings by fire. Since he has a defect, he shall not come near to offer the bread of his God. Okay. Here's the issue. Perfect God requires perfect sacrifices. Okay? No unblemished lambs. Okay? Unblemished lambs don't cut it. And there's other parts of the Pentateuch that talk about this too, where it talks about, hey, you want to give a sacrificial lamb? Yeah, no defects. Don't give the lame, the blind. If it's got only two of three legs remaining, two of the four legs remaining, it's not appropriate for a sacrifice. Well, the perfection that God requires does not just extend to the sacrifices, it extends to the sacrificers. The priests, and this is talking about priests, this is not talking about your average Joe, because your average Joe could not come into the temple to offer bread or meat sacrifices. Okay? This is talking about priests, Levitical priests. So, any Levitical priest who had these defects was disqualified from being able to participate in the holy rituals. And that's because there's a requirement here of both body and soul be ideal for priestly service. Okay. So, and we do see this in other portions of the ancient Near East too. Like, for example, in Egypt. You go to Egypt, where it talks about, say, the priestly service. Well, priests in Egypt had to be of a high physical quality as well. But the gods themselves were most ideally served by kings. That was who ideally served the god, was kings. And why was that? They had the most physical prowess. They were the most perfect specimens of amongst the Egyptians. They were supposed to be the most noble. They were the next best thing to the ideal human, and therefore fit to serve the gods. In Israelite culture, to serve Yahweh, you had to at least be whole. You had to be intact. You couldn't be a defective priest. You had to have your, at least the essentials in place. So, this is, again, a holy God, requires holy service and holy sacrifices. And that also applies to the sacrifices as well. So that is the reason why here, is that the standards that God is setting here for holiness are just that high. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate the question. It's a good question. It's a fair question. But that's the reason. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Okay, our next question comes from Akhenaten. Okay, that's an interesting name. And he asks, in your recent video on hell, you said that those in hell had free will. Yes. Do you mean they can change their mind in a way and then go to heaven? No. Okay. Here's the choice. And unfortunately, it's a choice between, do you sin more or do you sin less? It's not a change from their character or their disposition. Okay? That's set in stone. They've made that choice. Now, this doesn't rule out, say, the possibility of, say, second chance decisions, and that's a whole different debate. But for those who are basically committed to going to hell, that choice is set in stone. But their free will is still intact. So that choice is, well, do I want to commit 2 sins or do I want to commit 1 sin? Do I want just to envy or do I want to hate as well? So it's a matter not of that they can change their mind to change their destiny and their disposition. It's a matter of, can they change their mind to decrease or increase their suffering? And that's really what it boils down to. We see a passage, and I think it's in Ezekiel, but I'm not sure, where the kings of old are, they're lethargic. They're in Sheol. They're lethargic. They're on their thrones in Sheol, and they're enervated. They don't want to move. They don't want to do anything. They're sluggish. There's no ambition there. Well, those are sort of kings that has decided that, yeah, it's miserable here, but I don't want to make it worse for myself. So I'm just going to do nothing instead. So they've made a choice. And they've got the choice to change their mind. But they're taking the pragmatic approach to being in Sheol. And the bad side of Sheol. To point that out, they're on the naughty side of Sheol. But they're at that point making a strategic decision that doing nothing is better than hating, envying, coveting, all those sins of the mind that could increase their suffering. So they have a choice, but once they go to the bad place, that choice is limited. They still have free will to some extent, but it's limited by certain parameters that they have already decided upon. So anyway, it's a great question. It's a good question. Thank you very much for that question. Very much appreciated. Okay, our third non-super chat today is from Cam Britt. And he asks, in the Old Testament, demons seem to participate in the divine council. Does this change at some point? If so, why? All right. Yeah, they are in the Old Testament, have access to the divine council. And that does change. We do see it happening as late as Job. And Job is probably Iron Age 1 or 2. So, we're already in the divided monarchy period. Now, guys like Michael Heiser are going to speculate here that they get kicked out of the divine council at, say, the fall of Babel. I think it happens during the resurrection, at the resurrection. Christ is crucified. He's dead. The demons are saying in the divine council, ha-ha, gotcha. Then he comes back from the dead. And then the jig is up. They, at that point, lose their position. They're defeated at that point. At that point, they have no more standing in the divine council. They're just, doesn't matter what they say anymore in the divine council. They're defeated enemies. They're defeated. They have no say. Their end is absolutely, predetermined at that point. It's determined at that point. The resurrection changed everything. It changed everything for humanity. It changed everything for the divine council. They're done. There's nowhere for them to go. At that point, they just more or less have to leave. There's no place for them. There's no future for them. And, they're not going to be able to thwart anything in the divine council. They make a fuss, they get kicked out. They have to leave. So I think that's the turning point. The resurrection is the turning point. It's the point where the demons have no more say. Their fate's determined. They have to leave. And they have to leave also, again, for pragmatic reasons. Their only alternative at this point is to delay the inevitable fullness of the Gentiles. To delay it as long as possible. They can't do that from the divine council. They got to come down here to planet Earth to start wreaking havoc to do that. So that's sort of the gig here. They're out of the divine council at this point. They've been out of the divine council since the resurrection, and there's no return for them there. But anyway, that's my opinion on this. Michael Heiser is going to have a different opinion, but that's okay. This is one of those areas where we can say agree to disagree agreeably. So anyway, thank you very much for that question. It's an interesting question, and very much appreciated. Okay. Our fourth question is from Warrior of the Most High. He says Judges 1:1 begins with events that took place after Joshua's death. Then why is he still alive in Judges 6:8-4? I find it very confusing. Okay, let's talk about Judges here, and I will bring up our Bible. Judges 1:1. Okay. And 1:1 says, Now it came about after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, saying, Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? Okay, so, giving you the context of Judges. And typically the book of Judges is set in that area of after the death of Joshua. So that is typically the beginning of the period of the Judges. Now, chapter 2, verse 6 to 8. 2, 6 to 8. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit here. Okay, now we'll go over verse 1. Now the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up out of the land of Egypt and led you to the land which I have sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant to you. As for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars. You have not obeyed me, but what is this that you have done? Therefore, I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become as thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you. Okay? This is setting up context for the book of Judges. Okay? And it came about when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the sons of Israel that the people lifted up their voices and wept. Verse 5, so they named the place Bochim, and there they sacrificed the Lord. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went to each to his inheritance to possess the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen the great work of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. Verse 8, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Gaash. Okay. This is basically they're basically taking an earlier historic event in Judges 2, 6 to 8, and they're putting it in, they're inserting it in here. Now, they're not saying it's contemporary. They're basically reminding the reader of the book of Judges. We have to remember, the Bible is not wasn't written as one contiguous book. It was written as 66 books, at least in the Protestant canon, that were compiled together as an anthology. Okay? Judges would have typically have been read as a separate literary unit all on its own. So the writer, basically the compiler of Judges here, is taking into account, and we have to understand the way that the book of Judges is structured. It's structured in a very, very specific way. There are 12 judges, just like there are 12 tribes. The book of Joshua was written to describe the 12 tribes and their attempts to secure their inheritance during the life of Joshua. And the book is ordered from good tribes to bad and naughty tribes. Tribe of Judah, good tribe. Tribe of Dan, naughty tribe. Book of Judges is done the same way, but instead of tribes, it's judges. It starts off with a judge from the tribe of Judah. Good judge. It ends with Samson. Bad judge. Very, very naughty judge. Okay? So, this is giving you the context here. That after Joshua died and the elders died, they reverted to their ways. And they were told, this is a reminder, Judges 2, 6 to 8, that they were warned that if they followed the ways of the people of the land, that God would not sweep them aside and they would be a thorn and their gods would be a stumbling block. So that's what's happening here. It's meant to be a reminder of what happened before the time of the Judges to set the context of what's going to happen during the time of the Judges. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. It's a great question. Thank you very much for that question. Okay, we are now on to the super chats. 4 terrific questions to begin with. Fantastic. Okay, our first super chat is from Cambrit for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. John 5:25 and 1 Peter 3:19 seem to indicate that Jesus preached and saved souls in Sheol. Does this extend to the lost souls on the bad side of Sheol? No. Okay. The preaching of Jesus to the saved souls, we have to remember that according to the parable of Lazarus, and that really isn't a parable in the classical sense, because parables are generic stories that happen to uncertain people. They're general tales. In the tale of Lazarus, it begins with, there was a certain man named Lazarus. That's not a parable. That's a retelling of an actual account. So when Jesus talks about Lazarus, he's giving you what he knows of the other side in Sheol. That there was a certain man who begged at the table of a rich man, who ate from his scraps. Lazarus was righteous, the rich man wasn't. Both died. Lazarus was in the good side of Sheol, called Abraham's bosom. The rich man was in the bad side of Sheol. And between them was a gulf. Okay? They could somehow communicate across the gulf, but one side could not reach the other. There is a possibility that when Jesus did go down to Sheol, and he preached to the souls, saved souls in Sheol, he could have also informed the lost souls on the bad side of their fate. That is possible. That basically telling them, holiness is coming. You didn't like it before, it's not going to get any better. He could have told them that. It's possible he could have preached to the other side, but not to save, but to judge. We do have to understand that preaching does have 2 functions. Okay? There is a classic saying, grace to the humble, law to the proud. It's a classic edict of preaching and evangelism. It is very, very possible that Jesus preached grace to the saved souls. Hey, you're going to be with me in paradise today. It's equally possible that he could have preached to the condemned on the bad side and said, yeah, you're going to pay for your own sins. There's the law. Possible. We're not told exactly what he said, but it is possible that the preaching could have extended to those on the bad side as well. Because again, preaching is a sort of a 2-edged sword. It's got grace, but it's also got law. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Interesting question. Okay, our next super chat is from 501 Mobius for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Dr. Falk, when transporting heavy cargo, did the ancient Egyptians use 4-wheeled wagons or just 2-wheeled carts? Okay, the wheeled cart in Egypt actually occurs very late. The earliest evidence we have for a picture of a cart in say Egyptian iconography, I believe, is something like the 27th or 29th dynasty. It's in the late period. It's really late. It doesn't seem that we find a whole lot of wheeled carts in Egypt, at least until the late period. So that's when we start seeing it used. The fact is, when the Egyptians wanted to move something really, really heavy, and when I'm saying heavy, I mean like bricks. I mean massive obelisk kind of heavy. You know, when you're moving like 800 tons, they're using boats. They're using boats and they're using sledges. They're not using wheel carts because wheel carts can't carry as much in comparison to a sledge. They are going to use wheel carts, but they are going to use them like much later. We don't seem to find any wheeled carts during the New Kingdom. There is the possibility that they might have used them at, say, Dynasty 20, maybe Dynasty 19. But, you know, they're rare, very rare. They might have used them in, say, more, even possibly as say, royal movements. We do have to remember that wood in Egypt was really expensive. Wood in Egypt is a luxury item. They're going to use animals, pack animals, wherever possible. They're going to use donkeys, whenever they can need to haul something. They're going to use a donkey. Wood is expensive. Not only was it scarce, it was also in high demand. It was in high demand for chariots. A carpenter could get a lot more money off of selling a chariot than he could getting a cart. So he's gonna, if he's got the wood to make a wheel, and that's really what they're doing, is they're taking wood, steaming it, and warping it to make a wheel. If they're going to make a wheel, they're going to put it on a chariot and get like 5 times the cash that they would for, say, an ox cart. Now, they probably did have ox carts of some kind. We just don't have the evidence for it. But again, we're talking something here that's a luxury item, real expensive. Probably your typical farmer is not going to be able to afford this. You might find some upper class people who have ox carts. But we don't find the wheel coming into Egypt until Dynasty 15. That's the earliest extant wheel we find in Egypt. So it's not going to be any earlier than that. It's probably not going to be, it's probably not going to go into general use until the late period. Again, the wealthy are going to have their carts first. So you're going to have to keep that in mind. But most of the time, for real heavy loads, they're going to use a sledge. Sledge pulled by oxen. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Our next super chat is from Brick Creation for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Good to see you here tonight. Dr. Falk, can you explain Daniel 9, 70 weeks of prophecy, and what date in history that started from, and how it should end? Okay. Let's bring up Daniel. Daniel, chapter 9, and I happen to know that this is verse 20, I believe. Verse 24. All right. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end to sin, to make an atonement for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and to discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 70 weeks, and 62 weeks it will be rebuilt again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Okay. The question here is, when does the 70 weeks start? And it is with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. When is that decree? Okay. And for that, we have to actually go to the book of Ezra. Go to the book of Ezra. All right, as you can see, I did a decree search. And Ezra 4:19, there's a decree given by Artaxerxes to stop the reconstruction of the temple in chapter 4. And the people of Jerusalem are saying, hey, wait, we have a decree that precedes this. Wait, not so fast. You can't just tell us to stop. So, where do we go for this? Is we go to Ezra chapter 5, verse 13. And it says, however, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. So, when was the first year of Cyrus II? That's really what it comes down to. So that was Cyrus the Great. And that would be in here. We begin. Conquest of Babylon. His reign begins in 600. And Cyrus the Great, conquest of Babylon. He conquers Babylon in 539 BC. So that is the first year of Cyrus the Great after he conquers Babylon. Okay. So he's king of Persia. And you notice here that in verse 13, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon. His first year as ruler of Babylon. That's in 539 BC. Okay. So, that is when the clock begins on the 70 weeks, is in 539 BC. I'll leave the rest of the map up to you. Okay? So, anyway, well, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And great question. Okay, our next super chat is from Recreation again. $5 Thank you very much for super chat. Any archaeological evidence for the events in the Book of Judges? Some. There is some. Most recently is the Jerubbabel ostraca. Basically, a little ostraca that was found in sort of Philistine territory that has the name Jerubbabel, and the epigraphy of which dates to around the time of the Judges, roughly around 1100 BC. So, given that that name does appear in the Book of Judges, that's actually a pretty good piece of evidence for some of the events that took place in Judges, especially since the name Jerubbabel is a pejorative. Nobody names their kid Jerubbabel. Okay? Let's be clear about that. It means let Baal deal with him. Okay? Baal worshippers don't name their kids that. You know, that's the equivalent of Baal hates you. Your God hates you. Yeah, nobody names their kid that. But this was a person who thought the name was significantly enough that he used it, and he used it on his ceramics, on his basically his wine vessels, the pots that would be used for holding wine after harvest. So, you know, that's a very, very significant find right there. Now, is there other evidence? Yes, we do have evidence of, say, occupation by Israelite settlements, definitely in this period of time. You know, dozens and dozens and dozens of new Israelite settlements are going up during the conquest and into the period of the Judges. So, absolutely, there's more than enough evidence to at least to confirm that a good portion of the events of the Book of Judges took place. Some of the specifics we still don't have the details on. It is actually it's a lot smaller period of time. It's only about 200 years. So finding stuff within that 200-year time period can be difficult, especially, again, a smaller window of time is generally more difficult to find evidence for. So, with that said, what we've found so far does seem to confirm. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Right, Brick Creation for $20. Thank you very much for the super chat. Is it possible that biblical prophecy can have ambiguity and could be fulfilled to a near and far future double fulfillment at the same time? Oh yes, definitely, definitely. Happens all the time. Happens all the time in prophetic writing. For example, the little horn in Daniel 8 could be Antiochus near, but Antichrist far later. Yes, absolutely. This is something that's called amphibole. It's an intentional process of writing where you refer to two things at the same time. It is a common feature of poetic writing in, say, Egyptian manuscripts. We find this all the time in Egyptian manuscripts. And more importantly, we find this in, say, Egyptian prophetic literature. It is a very, very common feature of Egyptian prophetic literature. So, yes, this is definitely something we do find in not just prophecy of ancient Israel, and we do find it here as well. We find it here. We also find it in prophetic literature across the ancient Near East. So, absolutely. It's called amphibole. It means writing with two intents at the same time. And as I said, it's a literary device. It's a literary device. And it's a literary device that is, as I say, extant throughout the ancient Near East. So anyway, thank you very much. Like, for example, I think it's the prophecy of Nefertiti. Talks about that the citadel fell because of the immorality. Well, you read the text carefully, and it's ambiguous. It's not telling you whose ambiguity. Is it talking about the immorality of those people coming in, or the immorality of the people who were supposed to protect the border to prevent the influx of people coming in? The text is intentionally ambiguous so that there's a double reading there. There's actually an example there, again, from the prophecy of Nefertiti. And that's a Middle Kingdom Egyptian text. So we find this all across ancient Near Eastern prophecy and literature. It's just part of the literary style of, say, prophetic writings. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. It's a great question. I wish more exegetes knew about amphibole. You'll say this sometimes, and you'll get the deer in the headlights, even amongst academics. It's like, you did take a literature course, right? Okay. Pet peeve aside. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, our next super chat is again from Brick Creation for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. In Joel 3:6, it mentions the Jews were sold to Greeks by Tyre, Sidon, and the regions of Philistia. When would this have happened? Did the Jews know who the Greeks were at this time, 9th century? Okay. Let's get that message up. Joel, verse 6. Then I'm just going to read the one. All right. Verse 5. Since you have taken my silver and my gold, brought my precious treasures to your temple, and sold the sons of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks, this is Yavin, in order to remove them far from their territory, behold, I'm going to arouse them from the place where you have sold them and return your recompense on their head. Okay. The dating of the book of Joel is very controversial, and it's all going to depend on who you ask. Now, the Greeks were already conducting trading expeditions across the Mediterranean by the 7th century BC. Okay, they're already trading all across the Mediterranean at that point. They've already set up their trading colony at Naucratis in the 7th century. Okay, they're already sending boats down to Phoenicia in the 7th century, even probably earlier. So, did the Jews know who the Greeks were in the 9th century? That might be a little early. We do have on a statue of Ramses III, which is 12th century, where the Egyptian name for the Greek islands is mentioned. Okay, so the Egyptians sent trading expeditions to Greece at least as early as the 12th century BC. Now, again, they would have known probably about, say, the Trojan War. There would have been some because the Egyptians knew about the Trojan War. They might not have known. I mean, they get the Egyptians have receive a request for aid from the Hittites to help them fight the Trojan War. So there's already some Greek movement happening all across the Mediterranean as early as, say, the 12th, 11th centuries BC. So could the Jews have known about the Greeks in the 9th century? Maybe, possibly. They might be a little far inland for that. Could they have known about it by the 6th century? Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have to also remember that, they're also importing goods from Cyprus. Okay? Cyprus is not that far from Greece. We have examples of Cypriot ware going back at least to the 15th, if not earlier centuries. Okay? So, the Jews would have been aware of Cyprus. And if they were aware of Cyprus, it is possible they might have known about Greece as well. So, wouldn't put it past them. Now, the dating of the Book of Joel is going to depend entirely on who you ask. If it's a conservative commentator, they're going to put it pre-exilic, and they are probably going to put it to at least, say, the 6th or 7th centuries BC. If you ask, say, a liberal scholar, they're going to date this to, say, the 3rd or 4th centuries BC, post Nehemiah, roughly around 400 BC. So it's really going to depend on who you ask. Is it possible they do? Yeah, it's possible. Is it likely? That's a probabilistic estimation. They may have, may not have. I don't have a firm opinion on this. I'd probably lean more that they knew. I'm undecided as to when exactly the Book of Joel was written. So, yeah, it's a big stretch of time here, but we don't have solid clues. We don't have enough tangible in the Book of Joel itself to really make a determination. And that's really what it boils down to. Everything we know about the dating of Joel is by inference. So there's going to be some speculation here. That's sort of really inevitable when you're dealing with a book like this. So, unfortunately, that's sort of where we stand with the Book of Joel. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And sometimes that's just how it is. All right. Brick Creation for $2. Thank you very much for that super chat. Opinion on Andrew Henry, Religion for Breakfast. Okay. I don't have an opinion on his. I know he's a YouTuber. I have been asked to do some popcorn reviews of some of his work. I've never actually looked at his channel. Basically, I usually get the requests for, Religion for Breakfast long after I've actually decided on what I'm going to popcorn review that month. So I never actually go back and actually look at his channel. So I have never actually seen his channel. So I don't know anything about him really. Other than occasionally I will get requests to popcorn his channel. So unfortunately, I can't give you more than that. I just don't know. I've never watched him. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate it, but I can't give you a better answer. Sorry. Okay. Now we're on to the Twidgets. Back all the way to the beginning. It's like we didn't miss anything. And okay. We have a really super generous super chat from Sinaiacus Apologia for $100. Thank you very much. It's good to see you back. And he asks, in your opinion, is an allegorical understanding of Adam and Eve's story acceptable? I don't think it's the best understanding. Okay? I think there is some figurative language. Okay? There's definitely temple language there. There's temple language there. You are supposed to get the sense that, Adam and Eve are inside, say, a earthly temple where God has made his presence on earth, and earth has his special place and temple. And Eden, say, the holy of holies of his earthly temple. So you are supposed to get those impressions. But that is not, say, an allegorical reading per se. You are supposed to get the sense that Adam and Eve are real people. You are supposed to get the sense that there was a real act. There was a real sin. There was a real fall. Some of the details that surround that might have been tweaked to emphasize that, temple narrative. Okay, I mean, it is written within a certain understanding that Adam and Eve are representatives that are acting as not just progenitors of the human race, but as priests for the human race. Here's one of the very interesting details that I think people often miss about, say, Genesis 6. I'm going to pull this up because this is a detail I think people miss way too much. Yeah, verse 4, Michael Heiser's favorite passage. Okay. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. Okay. Here's one of the little tidbits. You're going to get something interesting here. You're going to get your $100 worth. When we look at late Bronze Age literature, Sons of God is all through late Bronze Age literature as basically kinds of priests. Okay? Daughters are priestesses. And the word men here isn't just any word for men. It's Adam. Okay? This is not daughters of Ish or masculinity. This is Adam. There's a strong possibility here that this is a priestess, a clade of priestesses that are carrying on a sort of distortion of the Adamic cult. You could even extend this to maybe ancestor worship. Here's one of the things. When this passage is exegeted, it's often said that, oh, sons of God, that's the line of Cain. Oh, the daughters of men, that's the line of Seth. Well, and then you're just supposed to get from that exegesis a good versus bad dichotomy here. Well, they're both bad. Okay. They're both rotten priesthoods. They're both violating sacred vows. They're just doing it in different ways. Sons of God are violating an Naditum vow. Daughters of men are ancestor worshipping. They're both bad. And I think that's a little detail here that daughters of Adam is being missed here. That Adam was meant to be a priest. And he was supposed to carry on a line of priests. What we see is by the time when you get close to the flood, that priesthood has become a priestesshood of what is probably an ancestor cult. So, there is supposed to be, to answer the question, there is supposed to be a literal kind of takeaway here. A literal Adam, a literal Eve, a literal fall, a literal sin, a literal expulsion from the garden. The details may be embellished, as I said, to tell the story within that temple context. So, an allegorical reading, I don't think is the best reading. I mean, depending on the allegory, and not all allegories are created equal either. You know, an allegorical reading could be perfectly acceptable if it's within the confines of orthodoxy. If it's outside the confines of orthodoxy, an allegorical reading can go really off the rails. I'm never comfortable with allegorical readings, just because there's too much slipperiness there. But it can be acceptable. It also can be really unacceptable too. So it's all going to depend on what the reading is. But thank you very much for that really generous super chat. I hope you got your money's worth here. Very, very much appreciated. Okay. Our next super chat is from Nick Felstead for 20 Australian. Thank you very much for that generous super chat. In your vid with IP, you mentioned that not eating pork was a part of Egyptian culture. Yes, I did. Did Israelites borrow from the tradition of the Egyptians and put pork down in the Bible that Yahweh says not to eat pork? Leviticus 11:27. Yes. Well, let's get to that. Okay. So we're going to go back to our Bibles. We always want to go back to our Bibles. 11:27. Okay. And it says in verse 27 of chapter 11 of Leviticus, also, whatever walks on its paws among the creatures that walk on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcasses becomes unclean until evening. Essentially, pigs. Okay. And it goes on. I mean, when it gets right down to it, this is about pigs. Now, we have to remember that all of these rules are not carved out of nothing. They're not fiat commands. They're not fiat commands where there was no pre-existing precedent. Okay? Yahweh is engaging Israelite culture and what they were doing at the time. They're very much engaging their culture. A command has no meaning if it doesn't engage the culture. You know? I mean, they could tell the Israelites, don't use a cell phone. Yeah, Yahweh knows what a cell phone is, because he can see all time and space. The Israelites aren't going to know what using a cell phone is. It's going to be absolutely meaningless to them, because cell phones don't engage their culture. You know, they're going to say, you know, God's not going to tell them to don't drink and drive. Yeah, drinking and drive is bad. But they don't know how to drive because they don't have the automobile. It doesn't engage their culture. A command like that would be meaningless. So God is going to give them commands that engage their culture and what they are doing currently. And he's going to say to some of them, this command is good, do this. You're doing this right now? Okay, that's fine. Keep doing this. But some other thing, you're doing that behavior, stop that. Cut it out. Okay? You're not eating pig right now. Excellent. Continue doing that when you go into the promised land. Okay? Your neighbors are going to be eating pig. Don't do it. Okay? Likewise, he's going to say to them, yeah, you're having sex with your neighbor's wife because that's what you were doing in Egypt. And you're still doing it now. Stop it. Don't do it. Evil, it's bad. Stop it. So, that's really what's happening here is, God is engaging their culture, looking at what they're doing in the present and what potentially could happen in the future to some extent. And he's saying to them, hey, this is good. This is okay. Continue doing that. Hey, you priest, you're bathing before you go into a temple. Continue doing that. That's good. Shows respect to God. Excellent. Good job. Keep doing it. He's also going to say to them, you touch that corpse before coming into a temple. Don't do that. You need ritual purification first. Okay? So he's gonna basically make those distinctions between behavior that's worth praising and behavior that he's going to tell them, hey, you got to stop this. So, and it's going to be stuff that the Israelites understand. It has to make sense to them, and it has to make sense to their culture. Otherwise, it's nonsense. So, this is why these laws don't come out of whole cloth. They have to have some traction with what's happening in the culture, or at least have the potential for happening in the culture. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Our next super chat comes from Inspiring Philosophy. Good to see you tonight, Michael. Okay, for $20. Thank you very much for that generous super chat. He says, in Hofmeier's book on Akhenaten, he seems to hint at the possibility his monotheistic cult was hearkening back to ancient Egyptian practices about the rulership of Re-Aten from 2650 to 2400 BC. Is this true or too speculative? Okay. I really disagree with Jim on this. Okay. I disagree with Jim on the whole Akhenaten thing. Now, I have huge respect for James Hofmeier. He was the guy who got me into Egyptology. He's a great friend of mine. I talk to him frequently. I consider myself to be a student of James Hofmeier. Okay. So, while I was a great student, I wasn't always the most attentive student. And frankly, I didn't even come to his view on the late Exodus until long after I left his teaching. But that's another story. However, when it comes to his view on Akhenaten, I disagree with him that Akhenaten was a monotheist. I think that Akhenaten is a monolatrous pantheist. And that's because if you read the hymns to the Aten carefully, you don't get monotheism out of that. You get pantheism. Where basically the Aten is all and in all and through all and all is the Aten. That's not monotheism. That's pantheism. Everything is the Aten. That is Akhenaten's religion in a nutshell. Okay? You and I exist. Well, I'm the Aten, you're the Aten, the air's the Aten. Aten was before time, Aten is after time. Aten gives you life. Aten, all the other gods are manifestations of the Aten. Everything's Aten. So, that's sort of them in a nutshell. So, if you've got a monotheistic cult here, it's really sort of hard to sort of trace that back. In a sense, in a very, very vague sense, Aten worship is loosely connected with the Re cult, the Re Aten cult, in the sense that the Aten, is the solar disk. And if you go back in time to say Tutmosis IV, Amenhotep III, when Aten worship starts to occur, it's at that point there starts to be that break between what's Re worship and what is the Aten worship. Prior to that, Aten was just the solar disk and was seen as a part of Re, but not an independent deity. Like, for example, you'll find, like, on the obelisks of Hatshepsut, she talks about the Aten, the glorious Aten of Re. Well, that's the solar disk. That if you see like a picture of Re on his solar bark, he's the falconine deity sitting on the bark, and on the top of his head is the solar disk. That solar disk, that's the Aten. Okay? And prior to, say, Tutmosis IV, there really was no distinction between Re and his solar disk. The solar disk was seen as an extension of Re. So in that one respect, it is a extension of the Re cult, but it's a splinter. It splinters off. I don't think, however, the practices of that Old Kingdom cult is, I don't think you can say that the practices of Aten, the Aten cult during the time of Akhenaten, were really, at least fully fleshed extensions of, say, the Old Kingdom Re Aten cult as it was practiced at Heliopolis. It is speculative, and part of the reason why it's speculative is we really know very, very little about how Re was worshipped in Heliopolis during the Old Kingdom. I don't think we have enough evidence there to go on. In the 5th dynasty, which is a little after the period he mentions here, where we have the Sun Temples, where the kings of Dynasty 5 are worshipping Re in their own private temples. The architecture even there does not look anything like what we see with, say, that we find at Amarna. The temples at Amarna are designed in a very, very different manner than we find even in Dynasty 5 Sun Temples. So I find that a difficult proposition to, say we have warrant for. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. But this is just one point where I disagree with my mentor on. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, we have a second really generous super chat from Sinaiacus Apologia. Wow. Thank you so very much. That's very, very generous. We really appreciate this. And he asks, how much influence did Egyptians have over the Greeks or vice versa? Well, it depends on the period. Okay? When we talk about, say, the first sort of contact, as I mentioned earlier in the live stream, was during the reign of, say, Ramses III, where there's some sort of, where the Egyptians are at least aware of the Greeks. In the 7th century, the Greeks established a trading colony in the Nile Delta called Naucratis. After that, you get a lot of Greek tourists coming in. And interestingly enough, those Greek tourists bring the seeds of philosophy with them back to Greece. And we have, like in the place of Sophocles, where he talks about these good-for-nothing Greek men who sit around talking philosophy of the Egyptians while their wives slave away in the field. It's quite a interesting caricature of Greek men. So there is that at least that one way influence. The Egyptians did influence the Greeks in the development of philosophy. And that is really an extension of Egyptian religious thought. Okay, the Greeks saw that they could take that Egyptian religious thought and apply it to secular things. So that's really interesting right there. Now, this goes two ways, but it's not going to come back the other way until Alexander the Great conquers Egypt and Ptolemy I comes to power. When Ptolemy comes to power, we start finding a Hellenization of Egyptian society. And in some respects, Egyptian society and Greek society in Egypt are two sort of parallel cultures. They don't mix well, but there is also inevitable cross-fertilization as well. Some Egyptian hymns are translated into Greek. Greek civil contracts start being used amongst Egyptians. Okay? So from 325 onward until the Roman period, there is actually a lot of cultural interchange going on between Greeks and Egyptians. The Egyptians are going to have their, Apis bull cult at Memphis. And the Greeks are going to take that Osiris Apis bull, and they're going to call it Serapis. They're going to take that god, that cow god, moo, and they're going to put Greek hair on him, give him a big Greek beard. They're going to Hellenize him, and they're going to call him Serapis. Or Serapis. Okay? And they're going to export that all over the Greek world. We're going to find that some of the Egyptian cults, like Horus and Isis, are going to become very, very popular in the Hellenistic world. We are going to find that Egyptian medicine is going to make inroads into the Greek world as well as say, basically taking on the form of, say, the Hippocratic teachings. Okay, Hippocrates doesn't get his idea out of whole cloth. He's getting his ideas from the Egyptians. He's getting medicine from them, or at least from people who have come back from Egypt with knowing some Egyptian medicine, and they start practicing it in Greece. So, it's a two-way street. It's really a two-way street. Ptolemy II is going to introduce coinage to Egypt. The Greeks are already using coinage at that point and have been using it for a long time, but they're going to introduce it into Egypt as well. So, we're going to find that there's a two-way street here. Eventually, the Egyptian language goes from, say, late Egyptian to Coptic. It's going to take on a Greek alphabet plus 6 additional letters. It's going to be Egyptian under the hood, but it's going to only be 90% Egyptian. The remaining 10% of Coptic vocabulary is going to be Greek vocabulary. When I took Coptic, this was really funny. Sitting in class, and, I'm with students who, did their full run of Egyptian, but had never taken a Greek class. And the Coptic teacher goes, well, what's this word here? And we're doing a reading of a text, and it was sarx. No one in class knew what it was. I said, oh, it's flesh. Flesh, it's Greek. And it's like, in some ways, Coptic is really, really easy once you take late Egyptian plus. And that is because of that Greek influence that the Ptolemies had over Egyptian culture. Now, in some places in Egypt, it's going to be more pure Egyptian than others. Towards the south, at Thebes, that's going to be an Egyptian enclave. At Hermopolis, that's going to be an Egyptian enclave. They're going to try to stay more true Egyptian. But culture is pervasive. It's really, really hard to keep all culture out. And the Greek culture was no exception. And vice versa as well. So anyway, thank you very much for that incredibly generous second super chat. Wow, amazing. We are so grateful and so thankful. So very much appreciated. Thank you so much for that super chat, and I hope that answers your question. Okay. We got our next super chat here from Rory Green for $20. Thank you very much for that generous super chat. Previously, you answered a question about 2 Kings chapter 3. You said that prophecy was not deterministic in the ancient understanding. Could you explain how First Temple Israelites would have understood prophecy? Okay. They would have sort of understood it as a conditional. Now, let me give you a prophecy. There's a prophecy that that's given to King David. Now, King David is on the run from King Saul. Okay, but he wants to go back to Jerusalem to collect his wife, Michal, daughter of Saul, essentially so he could lay claim to the throne. And the Lord comes to him and basically says to him, if you go to Jerusalem, Saul will capture you. David decides not to go to Jerusalem. He never gets captured. Okay? That is a prophecy with a conditional statement attached. Now, that's a very, very trippy thing if you happen to be a prophetic determinist. Okay? Because if you were a prophetic determinist, you would have to say, well, God knows he's going to go to Jerusalem and be captured, because that's the only way he can know he's going to be captured. Therefore, that protasis of that if statement, God knows that if he tells David he's going to disobey, going to go to Jerusalem anyway, and he's going to get captured. The only way you can get around that conundrum is if prophecy is not deterministic. Okay? So there's you just get into a rock and a hard place here if you say that prophecy is deterministic, because that forces you into a corner that basically says there's only one possible contingent future. That's the way that determinist prophecy works. Is there's only one path of the future, you cannot deviate from it in any way. But if you understand that a lot of prophecy is contingent or conditional, okay. Now, it depends upon the prophecy. Some prophecies will say, this will take place. There's no contingency involved there. There's other prophecy where you don't have the absolute future in mind. It's really going to depend. And it's also going to depend upon, say, degrees. Okay? If the prophet says, okay, he's going to put the enemy in your hands and you're going to have a complete and utter victory, there's nothing you can do to change this. There's nothing you can do to change this. If the prophet says he's going to put the enemy in your hands and stops right there, yeah, he's going to put the enemy in your hands. For how long? My wife, and she's going to probably hate me for telling this story. Can I tell the bus stop story? My wife, when she was going to college, she prayed. Oh God, please keep the bus there till I arrive. Yeah, she was about a block away, and the bus was staying there. So she thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna be it. She gets right up to the door of the bus. The bus closed the door in her face and pulled off. Well, the bus stayed there until she got there. She didn't get on the bus. Okay. Prophecy works similar. It only promises what it promises. But we can overinterpret it for it to promise more. we can overinterpret it to think it is being deterministic when it isn't. So I have to say here, you gotta be very careful when it comes to prophecy. Because just because you were given a prophecy doesn't mean it's going to come true for you in your lifetime. Not going to necessarily come through in your children's or grandchildren's lifetime. Or it might not mean exactly what you think it means. And sometimes it might be conditional. Like, for example, Isaiah chapter 9. Over the Syrian Ephraimite war, where the king of Israel, king of Judah, is promised, hey, I'll save you from the hands, but don't give tribute. And if you don't give tribute, Yahweh will save you, and you'll get a sign, and it will be Emmanuel. Well, it wasn't Emmanuel, because he did give tribute. He got the other sign. Find this here. If I can find it, I hope I can. If I can't, that's going to have to wait again. All right. So, with the Syrian Ephraimite war, and if he had just, the king had just stuck to his guns, and basically, trusted the Lord against the Syrian Ephraimites. And this is King Ahaz. This is the King Ahaz. Okay? King Ahaz is given a sign, and if he obeys the Lord, it will be Emmanuel, God with us. A woman shall conceive a child, and it will be called Emmanuel. Well, he approaches the prophet Isaiah 8:1. I'll pull this up too. And the Lord said to me, take for yourself a large tablet and write on it in ordinary letters. Swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. And I will take to myself faithful witnesses for testimony, Uriah the priest and Zechariah son of Jerebekiah. So I approached the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. Then the Lord said to me, name him Mahar-Shahal-Hashbaz. For before the boy knows how to cry out to my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. Essentially, Ahaz takes matters in his own hands. He doesn't trust God. He doesn't get the sign of Emmanuel. He gets another sign. That Tiglath-Pileser III is going to take all the wealth, because he didn't trust God. So, just because he got the Emmanuel prophecy didn't mean it was going to apply to him. It was conditional. It was conditional upon him trusting God. And because he didn't trust in God, he didn't get Emmanuel. He got Mahar-Shalal-Hashbaz instead. Okay? So I hope that helps you to understand that not all prophecies are deterministic, that some are conditional. Some of them depend upon obedience. Some of them are, unbreakably deterministic, but by no means all of them. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And it's a great question. Okay. Rory Green, again for $20. Thank you very much for that super chat. Going back to 2 Kings chapter 3, is there a connection between the command not to attack Moab in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 9, and the indignation and wrath that comes upon Israel? Thank you so much for your time. Hi, IP. Well, IP's got more fans on my channel than I do. See? was a good thing that IP and I are great friends now. Okay, let's go to Deuteronomy, chapter 2. We're just going to read this because it always is helpful to read it. And verse 9. Okay. And verse 9 says, Then the Lord said to me, Do not harass Moab, nor provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. Now, this is the Lord showing covenantal faithfulness to the posterity of Lot. Now, we do have to remember, Lot was not a perfect human being, but he was considered to be righteous. One of the only righteous people in that cesspool of Sodom and Gomorrah. So the posterity of Lot was to be left alone. Now, during the divided monarchy, the northern kingdom of Israel had grown very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Powerful to the extent that it could bully other surrounding kingdoms. It never had sort of the clout to bully the kingdom of Judah. But it was able to bully Aram, Moab, even sections of Philistia. It had been able to bring into its hegemonic sphere. Yeah, northern kingdom of Israel had a hegemonic sphere, and it had a stranglehold on the trade routes, and this made the northern kingdom of Israel very wealthy, exceptionally wealthy. Okay, so it had at some point managed to force Moab to pay tribute. Now, we don't understand why they were able to get away with it in the first time, seeing Deuteronomy 2:9. But we also know that, and we'll pull up the 2 Kings chapter 2 just for reference. 3. Okay, so Jeroboam the second, or Jehoram, son of Ahab. Jehoram, he was a bad king. He was one of those really naughty kings. And he did evil again in the way that Jeroboam the first did, which was he burned incense in the temple. He was that confusing those roles of king and priest. Just confusing those roles of king and priest. And judgment comes. The Lord did not take that kindly. He didn't take that kindly with Jeroboam, son of Nebat. He's not going to take it kindly with Jehoram, son of Ahab. So, any license that would have been extended to Ahab when Ahab brought Moab under hegemony would not have necessarily been extended to Jehoram, just because of his bad behavior. So it's like, okay, yeah, you want there is definitely a component of indignation and wrath here that's being piled onto Jehoram. But it isn't necessarily for Deuteronomy 2 verse 9, although that couldn't have helped. It's really, really because of what he does in the temple. That's the big sin here. That's the 800-pound elephant in the room. The 800-pound elephant in the room is the burning of the incense in the temple in Damascus, basically. And God's not. That was still a temple of Yahweh. Yeah, it was aberrant Yahweh worship, but it was still a temple of Yahweh. And if you want to worship Yahweh, you got to do it His way. So you've got an illicit temple with illicit worship by an illicit person. Oh yeah, wrath is coming. Definitely. That's sort of the 3 strikes you're out kind of deal. So yeah, at that point he's him losing Moab as a possession is a consequence of that. God's not going to bless that. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I hope that helped explain it. Okay. Let's see here. And we got here Tony G for 499. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And he asks, why did Judah monarchy maintain an affinity with Egypt given the momentous Exodus and Egypt's enervation? For example, broken reed in Isaiah 36:3 and 2 Kings 18:21. Okay, let's look at 2 Kings 18:21. 18, probably the more. Okay. Now, when we look at these passages, I'm just going to read a couple of these passages. 2 Kings 18, and we'll go start at verse 20. You say, but they are only empty words, I have counsel and strength for war. Now on whom do you rely, that you've rebelled against me? Now behold, you rely on the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who rely on him. Okay. Why did Judah rely on Egypt so much? We have to kind of understand that this goes all the way back to Solomon. Okay. Solomon basically cut a treaty. He signed a treaty with Egypt. And there was an exchange of wives. Now, the text doesn't say he cut a treaty, but that's what happened. Essentially, the exchange of wives, essentially Egypt, the king of Egypt, probably Siamam, sent his daughter to marry Solomon. And the bridal gift was Egypt subduing the city of Gezer. Okay. At that point, Solomon signs a treaty with Egypt to sort of cease hostilities. That is going to be deeply, deeply problematic for the future. Because first of all, we're told in the Torah, when you appoint a king for yourself, he is not to have many wives, many horses, or much gold, lest his heart be turned away. Solomon was infamous for the many wives. And the reason he had the many wives was because he was signing many treaties. He was signing treaties with every Tom, Dick, and Harry across the ancient Near East. Any small king or governor he would sign a treaty with and get a daughter out of it. Get a wife out of it. So he was making treaties all over the place. And Egypt was Judah's closest, most influential neighbor. So when it came to, say, Assyria, when Assyria started taking land, gobbling up territory, first they're gobbling up the Mitanni Empire, then they're heading into, say, the remains of the Neo-Hittite states, and they're just gobbling things up. Israel gets afraid. They conquer, Syria conquers the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. And then Judah gets afraid. Really, really afraid. And Judah thinks it cannot stand on its own. And from a worldly perspective, that would be true. Even though all the prophets are telling the kings of Judah, don't rely on Egypt. Egypt is perfidious. You can't trust them. They're going to let you down. They're going to even hurt you. Israelites do this anyway. And it's sort of God keeps telling the Israelites, look, I brought you out of Egypt once. You're going to go back. If you go back to Egypt, you're just going to fall into the patterns of the Egyptians again. And of course, that is what happens. You know, when Babylon conquers Israel, Judah, and Nebuchadnezzar II installs his puppet governor, Gedaliah. The Israelites, the Judahites, conspire to assassinate Gedaliah. Well, now Nebuchadnezzar's angry. What do? The prophet tells him, stay put. Jeremiah tells him, stay put. It'll be fine. Yeah, there might be some punishment, but it's not that bad. Don't go to Egypt. That's worse. Well, what do the Judahites do? They not only hightail it to Egypt, they kidnap Jeremiah as a good luck charm. They're thinking, hey, if I got this prophet with me, they can't. The Egyptians can't harm me. Well, one of Nebuchadnezzar's army sees otherwise. While Nebuchadnezzar doesn't go personally to Egypt, there's an Egyptian army that follows and wreaks havoc in Egypt. And Jeremiah ultimately dies in Egypt. And so do all those men. And their offspring, their progeny, become very Egyptianized. It's not pretty. We see the remnants of this actually at Elephantine, where we have papyri, Aramaic papyri from the 4th to the 2nd centuries, even I think it's even a couple from the 1st century BC, from Elephantine of these former Israelites. We do find out they're still sending some, at least in the early days, they're sending letters back to Israel, try to figure out what happened, after they left. But they go to Elephantine. They become mercenaries. They start burning incense and doing libation offerings to the Queen of Heaven. They're going, it goes south for them religiously. They are really becoming Egyptianized, including religiously. They fall right back into that kind of slavery. Slavery not of, say, the body, because they're mercenaries or contractors, but slavery of the mind. Slavery of the soul, slavery of the spirit. And that's the real concern here in, say, 2 Kings, in Isaiah. It's not the slavery of the person, it's the slavery of the soul. So, again, it's done out of fear. That's the reason why the Judahite monarchy is because they're not trusting God, they're afraid. Fear makes people do stupid things. And every con man knows this. You want to con something out of them? Make them get afraid of loss. Make them feel like they're going to lose out. Put that fear into them. Oh, what? I know this stock that's just going to zoom overnight. You don't invest right now, you'll lose a lot of money. Fear of loss. Con men use it all the time. So fear makes you do irrational, stupid things. And yeah, that's what was happening here in Judah. Is fear of the Assyrians, fear of the Babylonians, were causing the Judahite kings to do stupid things, which is to try to make Egypt their ally. And the problem was Egypt was not strong enough or trustworthy enough to be a good ally. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Hope that answers your question. Okay. We have got looks like a super sticker for $49.99 from AB. Oh, is there a question down there? Oh, okay, 7 down. So there's a question. Well, thank you for that very generous super chat. Wow, $49.99. Wow, that's a great super chat. Okay, okay, there's a question, I think. All right. AB asks, I've heard you mention there were no Israelites in Egypt, but didn't they become Israelites once Jacob was remained? Not quite. Sorry if this question was supposed to be in the super chat. No problem. We're more than happy to take the super chat that's missed. We're just so thankful that you were so generous, and we really, really appreciate such a generous super chat. Okay, now the thing is, Jacob is called Israel, okay? But they're not yet called Israelites. And the reason why they're not called Israelites yet is when we have to understand when they're in Egypt, they're called Amu. That's what they're called when they're in Egypt. They're called Amu. Semites. Levantine Semites. Asiatics. That's what the Egyptians called them. They may have been called the sons of Israel, but they weren't quite called Israelites. And the reason is because they don't become a nation. They don't become Israel until the Exodus. And the Lord says, I think I can try to look up that verse here. If I can find it. Right, there is a verse, and I cannot remember where it is off the top of my head. Okay. I think it is Exodus 19. This is just before the giving of the covenant. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my commandments, you shall be my own possession among all peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the sons of Israel. I'm going to double check here. I didn't. Okay. So here's the thing. Israel is not a unified people. Not while they're living in the city of Avaris, essentially. They're not called Israelites. They're called Asiatics. And Avaris, we know from, say, the archaeological remains at Avaris that it's a highly multicultural city. It isn't just the sons of Israel that are there. It's got Nubians. It's got Libyans. It's got other Semitic tribes, Canaanites. It's got native Egyptians. It's got Cushites. It's got Magi. It's a very, very multicultural city. So when the whole city picks up and leaves at the mid-Dynasty 19, it's taking all that ethnicity with it. For example, we were told that the sons of Israel left with a mixed multitude. Maybe that's where I... Yeah, okay. All right, this is the Exodus, and verse 12, or chapter 12, verse 37. Now the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot. Now, those 600,000, it's not 600,000, it's 600 clans on foot, aside from children. And a mixed multitude also went with them, along with flocks and herds and a very large number of livestock. So they're not one people yet. They're leaving as a multicultural mosaic, for lack of a better word. It's once they pass through the Sea of Reeds and into Sinai and go to Mount Sinai that they become one people, a holy nation. So that's sort of what's going on here. Is there are no Israelites in Egypt. They're Asiatics. They're sons of Israel, but they don't become Israelites proper until that mixed multitude is grafted into the 12 tribes. That becomes absorbed into the greater Israel. And once that absorption takes place, they are essentially forged by God in the Sinai, and then they become Israelites. Then they're the one people. And it's shortly after that that we find the first occurrences of the word Israelite in the archaeological record. And that's not a coincidence. It's just not a coincidence. It's something we just find in the archaeology, and it's something that even the Bible alludes to. It's the sons of Israel, say when they're living in Avaris, but it's Israelites once they are in the Sinai. So I hope that explains it. When I hear, I heard a guy, an atheist challenge Bible believers, once, and he said, "Oh, I'll give $5,000 to anyone who can prove that there were Israelites living in Egypt worshiping Yahweh." That's a fool's bet. He's never going to have to pay out. One, they weren't Israelites. Two, they didn't worship Yahweh in Egypt. We're told Moses brings Yahweh with him from Midian. They are not worshiping Yahweh in Avaris. They're worshiping Baal. They're worshiping Resheph. They're worshiping Astarte. They're worshiping a whole bunch of Egyptian deities. They aren't worshiping Yahweh. They're also not Israelites. They're a mixed multitude. They're a whole melting pot of various different peoples. But this is how cultures change. Perhaps I'm more acutely aware of this because I'm a Canadian. Canadian society is considered a mosaic. The U.S. society is considered a melting pot. Okay? You have to kind of view it in that way. Not to put a bad spin on Canadians, but Egypt was more like Canada. It was a mosaic. Sinai and Israel is more like the United States. It's a melting pot. People were meant to be grafted in. This is one of the reasons why we have certain righteous Gentiles in the Old Testament who are grafted into Israel. Ruth, the Moabite, grafted in. Rahab the harlot, grafted in. All these righteous Gentiles get grafted in. That is because the Jewish Israelite culture had that melting pot mentality. You're here, you want to be one of us, worship Yahweh, and become one of us. Egypt wasn't like that. Egypt had ethnically distinct enclaves. Now, that's how we can tell there were Nubians at Avaris, because they stuck to themselves. We see their burials, we see their weapons from their graves. That's how we know. So, yeah, Egypt was more like Canada. It's a mosaic. Israel and Sinai, melting pot. So anyway, thank you for that very, very generous super chat. Very much appreciated. I hope that fleshed it out a bit more for you. It's a good question, and it's worth asking. So thank you so much for that super chat. Yay. Historical Strategy Gaming. Good to see you tonight, RG, for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Expert thoughts on the discovery of General Waha Ibre Mary Neath. Yes, I knew that you were RG Strategy. Okay. We don't have anything more yet. I'm still waiting for something official to come down the pipeline. I would like to know more about this particular fellow. If I recall, I think he wasn't he. Sure, I remember this correctly. Yeah, commander of foreign mercenaries. Oh, he was 19th. Okay, he's dated to late 26th, early 20th, 27th dynasty. Okay, so early 5th century BC. So we are talking about sometime around basically the time when the Israelites are coming in, escaping Babylon to come to Egypt. So it is possible that this guy might have been in charge of many of the Israelites who came in as mercenaries. I don't know much more about this one yet. It's something I have to look into more to get more details on. I just have the news brief in front of me here, so I'm not even remembering this off the top of my head. I had just heard something really briefly about this, but I didn't get into any of the details. So yeah, apparently it was a pretty bare tomb from the looks of it. So we might not get a lot. Found 402 Shabtis. Yeah, the full set. You had to have some wealth. They're expensive. So, I mean, he had a lot of Shabtis for the afterlife. 2 more than necessary, actually. That was very interesting. So I guess he had some extras to even take out over for him. Maybe for the epigomenal days. Who knows? So 402, that's a lot of Shabtis. So that's kingly burial kind of Shabtis. So apparently he had some cash. But I don't know much more about than that. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay. John Febeck for 1999. Thank you very much for the super chat. What would a New Kingdom Egyptian know about the origins and history of their country? Would they have known about the unification wars or pre-dynastic kings? Would they have known Khufu built the Great Pyramid? Okay. Let's take these one at a time, because they're actually different questions and they're actually different answers. Would they have known Khufu built the Great Pyramid? Yes, they knew Khufu built the Great Pyramid. They had access to the mastabas around the Pyramid of Khufu. They know Khufu was who built it. There is actually the Sphinx temple was actually restored by one of the sons of Ramses II, who's called his name is Ka'amwasit, and he was one of the he's often called the first archaeologist. he would go into other people's tombs and make copies of the inscriptions. He would put his name on their tombs, basically said, I was here, I did a restoration. Okay? In many ways, he was the first conservator, because he would go into people's tombs and he would clean them up, restore them, make copies of them, of the writings. We know he restored the Sphinx, Great Sphinx at Giza, and erected a stela there, saying what he did to restore the Sphinx and the Sphinx Temple. So, yeah, they were aware, at least in Dynasty 19, that Khufu built the Great Pyramid. I'll take the first question now. What would a new kingdom Egyptian know about the origin and history of their country? They knew some. Would they have known about the unification wars or pre-dynastic kings? Yes. They would have known about the unification wars. But by the 19th dynasty, it does take on, say, a mythological kind of retelling. It is true that during, say, the New Kingdom, it is talk that you do see this, the Sematawi, the unification of the two lands. And this is something that is just repeated constantly in Egyptian texts. You see it worked onto, say, the frameworks of, say, thrones. You see the semi-sign with the lotus and the papyrus, indicating the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. So it is in their symbolism, and they do know about this, that there were two lands that were divided and then united again. And they knew, you look at, say, the king's list at the Temple of Abydos of Seti I, where it goes all the way back to the first kings who united the land. So they know about that. Now, pre-dynastic kings was kind of before they sort of that dropped out of memory. So they weren't aware of, say, after, say, Dynasty 5-ish, 6-ish, they sort of lost the names of the pre-dynastic kings. During the Middle Kingdom, one of the kings is named, who was Hor. His tomb is actually mistaken for the tomb of Osiris, and becomes a venerated cult site of Osiris instead of as the original tomb of the occupant, which was one of the pre-dynastic kings. So I think it was Horjed was the name of the king. So or Horden, I think. Horden. So the pre-dynastic kings do get sort of a raw deal. They get a raw deal. Their names are not remembered in Egyptian history. So, but they are aware of the unification wars. And they are aware that the first king was what they would call him Menes or Narmer. Okay? Now, Narmer is actually, they kind of confuse Menes and Narmer. Narmer actually is a slightly older king. Menes is actually what we would call now King Aha. Okay? So there was some confusion over those first kings of the Unification War, but they did have some memory of, at least by the kings of the first dynasty. But prior to that, they had they had very little memory of any of that. But what happened with the Unification Wars was it became mythologized. The king of Lower Egypt became mythologized with Seth. The king of Upper Egypt became mythologized with Horus, and that's where you get the contentions of Horus and Seth. The uncle of Horus versus, say, the son of Osiris. fighting it out for dominance over Egypt. So that was definitely how the unification wars was memorialized, was in as a kind of myth between Osiris and Seth. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. It's complex because the memory we don't a lot of Egyptian history is based upon the idea that everything stays the same. History in the Western mindset is all about change. Things change, we record a historical event. In the Egyptian mindset, everything stays the same. Hooray! That's the Egyptian concept of history. Everything has stayed the same since the forefathers. Yay! So, you know, you gotta take history from their point of view. They do remember certain things happening, though. They do remember certain events. They may not always remember them accurately. Like, for example, when they start by the Dynasty 19, when they start getting the prophecy of Nefertiti in their hands, they're no longer thinking the civil war of the first intermediate period, or the river turning to blood in the intermediate period, or the sun growing dark in the first intermediate period. They're saying, oh my gosh, this is prophecy, and it's telling us about current events that's happening right now in Dynasty 19. So they don't always remember their history accurately, but they do have some memory of it. Right? I hope that answered your super chat. Thank you very much for the question. It's a great set of questions, and it's a topic all of its own. The historiography of ancient Egypt. It's a very interesting topic all of its own. So, thank you so much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. We've got a $5 Canadian super chat from Paulus Patros. Thank you very much for that super chat. He says, what do you think of Assyriologist Simon Parpolo? Have you read the paper, The Assyrian Tree of Life, Tracing the Origins of Jewish Monotheism? No, I haven't. Haven't read that paper. My thought on Jewish monotheism is it goes back to the Ten Commandments. I think it goes back to Torah. So I don't know if an Assyrian Tree of Life is necessarily going to contribute a lot. Now, we know that as far as the Tree of Life as a symbol in ancient Near East, it's ubiquitous. We find it in Egypt, all over the place. You go to Karnak Temple, you'll see the Tree of Life. You'll see a tree where the name of the pharaoh is being written on the leaves. See it for Seti I. You see it for Ramses II. You see it for Merneptah. You see it for you'll find it at Karnak. You'll find it at the Ramesseum. So it's all over the place in Egypt. The Israelites would have been definitely aware of the Tree of Life even as early as the 13th century. Absolutely, they would have been aware of this. So I don't know what he's driving at in this paper because I haven't read it, and I don't know much about him as an Assyriologist. So I can't answer it more than that. But the Tree of Life, oh yeah, I can answer that because we see it all over Egypt. it's a common motif. It's a common motif, and you'll even find right beside the Tree of Life this long sort of crooked staff. It's the Egyptian word rempet, and it means and it's meant to symbolize many years. So, you know, that tree with the renpet, you're supposed to get the impression that for every leaf that the pharaoh is named on the tree, he has another year. And his years have been mapped out by Thoth. Thoth is writing on each leaf of the tree, giving pharaoh another year. A very, very interesting symbol. Very interesting symbol. But that would inevitably would be, say, some of the origins of the tree of life, because you find it, as I say, across the ancient Near East. Trees are the symbol of living things. You even find this on a lot of, say, modern, modern letterhead. Like green organizations will often use a tree as a symbol of life. So it's not uncommon. It's just part of, say, the human condition. So I don't know anything about the paper. Haven't read it, but and I haven't read. I don't know his views on monotheism. But all I can comment on is the tree of life itself. So anyway, I wish I could have said more about Parpel himself and his paper, but I haven't read it. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Okay. Rory Green for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he says, thank you for the detailed answers and the illustrator's sorry from Mrs. Falk. You got a smile out of her. She appreciated that. Well, you're most welcome. We really appreciate the super chats. We really appreciate that you're helping us in our ministry as well. And it's our pleasure to be able to answer your questions. That's why we do this. We do this because it's our way of giving back to the community, by taking, our Friday nights to really take as much opportunity as we can to answer as many questions as possible. So thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And it was our pleasure to answer your questions. Okay. See here. Roy Green for $2. Thank you for the super chat. Unrelated. But favorite guitarists. Ooh. Oh. I don't know guitarists a lot by name. But, I have to admit, I do like I think it's Robert Plant, who's the guitarist of Led Zeppelin, is it? He the guitarist from Led Zeppelin? I like the guitars from Led Zeppelin. I like the guitars from the Eagles. Let's see, who else? Nirvana, of course. I mean, that was really, uh, you know, um, Smells of Teen Spirit. I mean, that guitar was that was unbelievable. Uh, who else would in there? Have you gone to Scarborough Fair? I think. Parsley Sage from Mary in Time. That guitar I really like. As I say, I don't have a strong following of individual guitarists, but there are tunes and melodies and licks that I really like, and those I really gravitate to, like the Hotel California. I mean, that I love the guitar on the Hotel California. It's just beautiful, beautiful. I hear that every time. When I hear that every time, it's just like, oh, that's sweet guitar work. Sweet guitar work. So, again, I don't follow guitarists, the career of guitarists, but there's songs I really like, and I more pick out songs than I do pick out people. That's because my ear is more geared towards the picking out of tunes than remembering faces and names. This is why also I do more composition than I actually do playing. Because I get that sort of tune in my head, and then turn that tune over and over and over and over, and eventually it comes out as something else. So so I do a lot more composition than I actually do playing. So and here's one. Honestly, to be honest, one of my favorite um, composers to play on the guitar is actually Bach. And that sounds really, really strange. But, you know, I used to play Fur-Elise on the guitar, and I liked it. You know, Bach has some crazy um, tunes that just sound really wild on a guitar. So actually, Bach is actually one of my favorites. If there was one, my favorite guitarist never played the guitar. Never knew what a guitar was. But his music just adapts so well to the guitar, which is really odd to say. But it just, um, I mean, Bach is great. Bach is fantastic. And I love just. I mean, I've got his entire song sheet collection, and I just like will go through just some unknown piece from Bach and start playing it on the guitar, and it's just like, wow, this is just wild. I love doing that. It's just that just makes my day. That makes me a happy camper when I can take Bach, my guitar, and just play. So, anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Exceptionally interesting question it turned out to be. So thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, it was Jimmy. JV Colzer says that Robert Plant was the vocalist, Jimmy Page. You see, I don't follow people. I don't follow the people. It's just I hear the sounds. I hear the sounds, and that's what I key into. Just I just don't remember the people. I don't remember their names. Okay, we have this interesting super chat from Australopithecus afarensis for $1.99. Thank you very much, super chat. I experienced hell and purgatory already. Well, we all live through our types of hell and purgatory. That's a relative thing. I don't think you can live in this world for any length of time without experiencing some suffering, some misery. Everyone goes through some problems or crises. Some of it can seem very overwhelming. I've had my share, and I'm sure most of our audience has too. The fact is, though, that what do you do with that? Who do you take it to? And if take it to, say, God, he can heal all things. And that's the promise we have, is restoration and new life. Not just salvation, but restoration. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. A little morose super chat, but thank you very much for the super chat anyway. Australopithecus afarensis for $1.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Will you convert to Catholicism soon? Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Look, here's the thing. I'm going to be right straight up with you. I never talk about my denominational leanings. I just straight up don't do it. And that is because, and I said it many, many times, and that's because I for two reasons. It's two reasons. First is I don't want to cause strife on my channel. Okay, when I talk, if I talk about where my denominational leanings are, that's gonna show where my skin is in the game. And you're gonna get some people on my channel and goes, "Yay, he's on my side," and others that go, "Ooh, you rotten heretic." It doesn't matter where you land on that. that spectrum of denominationalism, you're going to get that reaction. I don't want to go there. Okay? I want us to treat each other with kindness and respect. I want the dialogue on my channel to be civil. I want it to be kind. I want it to be respectful. I want it to be productive. The other reason I don't mention my denomination is because I'm an equal opportunity abuser. I think there is just grounds to criticize all denominations. Whether that is a Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Protestantism, evangelicalism, fundamentalism, some strange community church out on the polar ice cap. Doesn't matter. All churches are, no church is immune from criticism. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All have communal guilt to some respect. Okay? So, if I am to evaluate the doctrines of any particular church with fairness, okay, I cannot just come out and say, oh, here's what I think is the best for me. And frankly, even if that was the best for me, it doesn't mean it's best for everyone. It's just best for me. And it might be best for me just for a little while. Might be best for me for a year. Might be best for me for 10 years. Might be best for me for the rest of my life. But I don't know that. God may just say to me one day, hey, David, time for you to pick up and go to this little church over there. Happened before. Happened several times. Because of that, I don't pick sides. I don't pick sides when it comes to denominations. And I don't pick sides, and I don't have preferences when I criticize them. But if I start declaring who I am denominationally, people are going to say, oh, you're taking it easy on this church. You're taking it easy on them. You're siding with them. You never criticize them. I might be criticizing them left and right, but I'll still get the criticism that, oh, you're not criticizing them because you're one of them. No, I'm going to criticize them all equally. You know? And I could go into where the Eastern Orthodox are wrong, Catholics are wrong, Protestants are wrong, the fundamentalists are wrong, the community churches are wrong, the evangelicals are wrong, you name it. I have no problem with that. It doesn't bother me one bit to point out where they're wrong. Now, with all that said, I am unmistakably Christian. That is my perspective. I am a conservative Christian who believes in the historic Christian faith once for all given to the saints. Now, what that means will depend upon which church tradition you are in, and I'm not going to go into that. But Christ first. Gospel first. The Bible first. Then all the denominational distinctives, that's a distant second. I keep my priorities in the right place. Because I can do that, I have no need to wear my denomination on my sleeve. So, I hope that answered your question. Even if I did convert to Catholicism, I wouldn't tell you. And there's nothing saying I haven't already. Because I never told you what my denomination was to begin with. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. But there's the answer. Okay, I think that is the end of the super chats. We will take a couple non-super chats and then we'll call it a night. So let's see what we got here for non-super chats. Start from the end and work my way back. So right now I am looking for non-super chats. I see Swiftsy's question, but I can't give a good answer to it because I haven't read it. All right, I'll take Gabriel's question here on the Sphinx. He says, my friend mentioned an odd theory that the Sphinx is much older than is currently thought. Yeah, it's a crank theory. It really is. I asked him who he heard this, and he said Graham Hancock. Is this guy a charlatan? Yes, he is a charlatan. He's of the ancient aliens kind of charlatan mindset. Okay? Yeah, he's a nutter. Graham Hancock is a complete nut job. He was a former journalist who discovered that he could make a lot more money doing alien technology in ancient times, essentially. The fact is that the Sphinx dates to the time of King Khafre of the old dynasty, of Dynasty 4. Okay. Basically, what they're basically saying is that the erosion of the Sphinx could not have happened as fast as it did because it's made of stone. Stone's so hard. Well, you look at the very, very much newer, shinier Temple of Menkaure right next door to the Sphinx, and you can see what erosion does to stone. You think the erosion on the Sphinx is bad. You should see the erosion on the Temple of Menkaure. It looks like a lunar landscape. You know, the walls look like they're Swiss cheese. I mean, big blocks, that are 6 feet wide, carved into nothing. It's really crazy. I should post some of my pictures from the Temple of Menkaure someday, just because it's nuts how bad the erosion is there. And we have to understand that all that limestone, and Sphinx is limestone essentially, is layers of hard and soft rock. Basically, there's a harder and softer limestone. But none of it is impervious to the erosion that you find at the Giza Plateau. And it's basically all wind erosion. Basically, the wind picking up sand and abrading it. So, no, the theory here doesn't have a leg to stand on. So, that's all I can say about this. Really, it is a fringe theory. It's a cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs theory, and Graham Hancock is a charlatan. So, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I just see another super chat here. Just come in, hot off the presses. Okay, Slim2K says for $5. Why do you think we don't have blueprints on how the pyramids were built? What tools cut the stones precisely? How were they moved, etc.? Okay. One of the things is we know that the Egyptians didn't cut stones precisely. They used this really neat trick. Okay? You have a slab of stone. You cut it roughly. You take the stone, you put a core in the center of it, because all these stones had holes in it, like sort of a lot of the big ones had holes in the middle of it, and you turn it around and you abrade the bottom. You can make a stone flat very, very fast this way. It's the same sort of technology that's used for polishing mirrors or glass. You can take one piece of glass, put some rouge on it, and rub it against another piece of glass, and you eventually will get a polished surface. Even if that glass is very rough. Okay? Same thing same technology is used for cutting gemstones. It's just abrasion. Just abrasion. So we know this because we, like, for example, we look at, say, the there's some unfinished columns at Karnak Temple. And you go to Karnak Temple, and these are sort of Dynasty 30 columns that date to sort of Nectum Nebo. And they're not round. They're not finished on the outside. They're stacked one on top of the other, and they're rough on the sides. I mean, really like hewn rock kind of rough. It was really astounding how rough it is. I mean, it's not finished in the slightest. So essentially what they're doing is they're doing that abrasion on two sides, stacking them up after that, and then they're going in afterwards and then chiseling it round and then polishing it round. So a lot of these weren't cut to fit. They were abraded to fit and then sort of finished after the fact. We do see something like that. There's an unfinished pyramid of a queen beside Khufu's pyramid. And you see that there too, where the stones are piled and they're not finished cut. Only sort of the intersecting sides have been abraded down to fit. So we know that a lot of this polishing was done after they were put in place, not before. Now, how were they moved? A lot of them were moved by boat. Smaller ones were moved by sledge. The really big ones were moved by boat. Smaller ones were moved by sledge. And we do know that there were docks, a port that was right in front of the Sphinx Temple. So if you go to the Sphinx Temple today, right outside of the Sphinx Temple is a port. And the boats were floated right up to the Sphinx Temple and could be unloaded. Now, presumably, there might have been other ports that got it close to, say, the other two pyramids as well. But we know for, say, Khafre's temple, the boat went right up to there. That's fascinating how they could do. And we have to remember, Egyptians are masters of hydrologic engineering. They could make canals that go deep inland. They're very, very good at this. You know, all they have to do is move enough sand and stone and dirt to get the water close enough so that they can move that boat right up into there. So, yeah. A lot of it was moved by boat, and the rest by sledge. As for the blueprints, we don't have a lot of blueprints from ancient Egypt in general. We do have some. We have some blueprints of, say, the construction of large sphinxes, the construction of obelisks. Pyramids might have also had blueprints too, but we don't have any of them recorded. We don't have any extant. So it's possible they could have had blueprints. The Egyptians did use blueprints, but the preservation of those blueprints is very hasn't happened. Now, we do find some papyri from the Red Sea that have writing that describe the building of the pyramids. Okay, that give us some description on how, say, the pyramid of Khufu was being constructed. But we don't have any, say, blueprints from that cache, as far as I know. I have the collection in my library, but I didn't see any blueprints in there. So it's possible they could have used blueprints. We just don't have it. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And I see you just put in another one. Right. Just like this. All right, Slim2K for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Doesn't the Sphinx show water erosion from rain? No, it doesn't, unfortunately. We do know that the Giza Plateau was a floodplain, but it didn't get rain. Not very often. It's essentially wind erosion. In some ways, wind erosion is worse than water erosion. Worse. We don't have any evidence of wind erosion, not at Giza. We do know that it was a floodplain at least 2 million years ago. We do know that it's an incredibly all that limestone was laid down by flood deposition. Again, way back in they say millions of years ago. But it doesn't get a lot of precipitation. And not enough to cause the erosion it did. Now, water can wreak havoc. For example, Thebes gets rain sometimes, like once a century. And it can fill a lot of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. It can move house-sized boulders to get that much rain. But the Sphinx itself does not show signs of water erosion. It does show lots and lots and lots of signs of wind erosion. And as I said, wind erosion is almost worse. And the reason why wind erosion is almost worse is because it happens every day. Water erosion, once in a blue moon. Once a century. If that. Wind erosion, every day. Every day. Every hour. For a century, which is going to have the greater effect. Wind picking up sand, this is essentially a sand blower, a sand blaster. You want to see erosion? Use a sand blaster. It's the same effect. I used to love sand blasters when I did art school. It was just you want a very interesting effect on a piece of metal. Mask it off, take the sand blaster to it. Oh yeah. You get instant. How do you say it? Instant matting on a piece of metal. Beautiful effect. I love it. All right. Here I wax artistic. But yeah, wind erosion. I mean, for example, Jericho. That's one of the big problems they have in conservation at Jericho is wind erosion, not water erosion. Wind erosion is the big problem for conservation at Jericho. You can see this in their latest conservation report, where they talk about wind erosion. It wreaks havoc with the mortar in bricks. It wreaks havoc with a stone. It does real damage to archaeological sites. And it did incredible damage to the Sphinx. So, the only reason why a lot of the facial characteristics of the Sphinx survived was mostly the wind comes from the west to the east across the Giza Plateau. You're walking towards the pyramids and you can get a face full of sand sometimes. I've had that happen, where I'm walking on the Giza Plateau. I'm walking in the middle of the sand dune. Wind picks up and just blows a whole bunch of sand in your face, and you're just going, So you do see a lot of erosion on the hindquarters of the Sphinx. And there's a reason, and that's because of that sand erosion that takes place. So, anyway, no, we don't have any signs of water erosion at the Sphinx. Some small amount could have been water erosion, but not enough to really matter here. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, we'll take a couple more super chats and then we'll call it a night. Fav the Duat. Question: what is your favorite type of cheese? Scouse. And I'm gonna put that. In side chat here. Because it's really difficult to spell. And it doesn't sound like anything the way it is pronounced. So I'm going to put that in live stream here. I'm going to tell my French cheese story too. So there it is. the spelling of my favorite cheese. Okay. Now, I picked up a taste for this cheese when I lived in Liverpool. In Liverpool, when I was doing my PhD in Liverpool, I used to go to Sainsbury, and they would have, they would mark down the cheeses, as they get close to the expiration date. They would mark it down to like 30 cents for like a piece of brie. 30 pence for a piece of brie. I mean, that's just, oh. I mean, I bought so much brie when I lived in England. I was eating brie in mac and cheese. I was making grilled cheese brie sandwiches with strawberries and balsamic drizzled on it. Oh yeah, I was just totally in my cheese loving glory in England. Okay, so but it's a French cheese. It's basically like a very, very thick brie. It's about 2-3 inches tall, and it's in like little roundels, about I'd say 5 or 6 inches across. And it's really, really soft on the inside, much softer than a brie or a camembert. Okay, and okay, so I got this used to love this French cheese, and it's a French cheese. Now, a couple years later, I go back to Paris, and I'm in Paris, and I want to do I want to bring home a snack at night. So I figured, you know what? I was going to go to, get a French baguette, a bottle of red Bordeaux, and some shouse, some shouse for, and at that point, I didn't know how to pronounce the cheese. So I go to this fromager. The fromager is a place where you buy cheese in Paris. There's fromagers. A lot of cities have fromagers now, but Paris has a lot of them. So I go to this fromager in Paris, and of course they all speak English there, and they definitely do not want me speaking French. But that's the fromager. Okay, it's this cheese here. How do you pronounce that? How do you pronounce the name of that? Because I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. He looks at it for a moment. He thinks about it. He says, cheese. He couldn't figure it out either. Okay, if the French can't pronounce their own cheeses, how is an English person supposed to do it? I did find out, though, it is pronounced shouse. Okay? I actually found out from a specialist who is an expert on cheese. Okay, not a fromager, a actual scholar of cheese. So I did actually find that out. So, but that was after. But the French don't even know how to pronounce it, most of them. So, but it is my favorite cheese. It is delicious. It is absolutely delicious. Once you have it, you'll be spoiled for brie type cheeses forever. It was just so good, especially when it's at the right age. Just beautiful cheese. So, thank you very much for that non-super chat. It's an interesting question and a cheesy one also. So, let us get back to a couple more non-super chats, and we call it a nighty. So, And let's see here. Let's take this one. Marcy Powell. Okay. Moses' mom, Jochebed, had a Yahweh theophoric name with that Yo at the beginning, right? So, there are at least a bit of Yahweh worship among pre-Exodus Hebrews. Now, let me look that one up. Because not all happen. I think that one is a theophoric name, but not all of them are. Yeah, Yokavod, Lord is glory. Okay, now, here's one of the things we kind of have to be cognizant of, too. Is some people change their names. And they changed their names after they came out of Egypt. Because they had the theophoric names of pagan gods. So just because the record records them having a theophoric name, does not a Yahweh name, does not mean they originally had a Yahweh name. Moses, for example, did not originally have a Yahweh name. And he still doesn't have a Yahweh name, but his name was originally theophoric, and they removed the theophoric element. So Moses would have probably had a name something like Amen M. Shea, or Montu M. Shea, or Moot M. Shea. So just because they have a theophoric name, and here's the thing: a lot of what we see in, for example, Moses' mother. How would it look if Moses' mother was named Balkabed? The glory of Baal. That would be a terrible, terrible look for. That would be a terrible look for Moses' mother to have a name that says Baal, give Baal the glory. Okay? The glory of Baal. So, a lot of these names were changed to reflect Yahwehism. And that's because the consequences of this for people coming into, say, the land of Israel would have been pretty bad. So anyway, that's the best we can explain it. Is that even though it sounds like they had theophoric Yahweh names, they probably had a different name prior, and that was changed later to, be consistent with Yahweh worship. And this would prevent that stumbling block for Israel when they went into the land. Okay, so thank you very much for that question. It's a question we've had before on this channel, and it's worth answering again just to make it clear. Okay, let's see what else here. Something else here. I'll take this one here from Dian Silzar. Did Egypt or Israel have an equivalent to chess? No, not really. The closest thing Egypt had was a game called Senet, which was a kind of a race type of game. And it's a Senet board. We don't know what the rules are, but it did have multiple pieces. But it's probably the closest thing. Chess itself is a game that developed during the Islamic period, and it comes out of Islam. and it was adapted by Europeans who, adapted it for sort of more Western tastes. But no, unfortunately, they did not have a version of chess in ancient Egypt. As I said, Senate is the closest thing they had, and we don't know the rules for it. So, thank you very much for the question. Hey. Yeah, I did not understand that question. So that's for that. I think this one from 501 Mobius. How did the Israelites move the tabernacle parts? Okay. What they did was the thing about the tabernacle is that you could completely take the whole thing apart. It was meant to be taken apart. You could take apart the whole tabernacle. It was modular. It was a very, very interesting, just modular design. So what they did was they essentially take the beams down, the cross beams, and then the corner beams, let the tent fall, and then just roll it up. It's a tent, essentially. The tabernacle is essentially just a tent with beams and poles. It was meant to be taken apart, and then they would just carry it from place to place. That was what the purpose of the the Gershonites were, or the Kohathites, or the Levites who were in charge of packing. There was one tribe or one clan of Levites that was responsible for setting up the tabernacle. Another one that was responsible for carrying the tabernacle. Another one that was responsible for priestly service within the tabernacle. Within that, the family of Aaron. So each sort of clan of Levi had its own sort of responsibilities within there. As I said, one of them had responsible for the setup and teardown, and then another had a responsibility for carrying it. So that's how they would move it. Essentially, they would assemble it, take it down, then the other clan would carry it to the next location. So that's the answer to that one in a nutshell. It's a modular design. It's meant to be disassembled, and it's meant to be easily disassembled, easily transported, and easily reassembled. So anyway, thank you very much for that question. Very interesting. There's I think there is a book on the tabernacle that talks about how the modularity worked. I wish I remember the name of it at the moment, but it slips my mind. But anyway, thank you very much for the question. And then we'll take probably one more question, and then we'll probably call it a night. And if I don't find another question that strikes my fancy, then we will just call it a night, because we've actually been very good and answered a lot of non-super chats tonight. So I don't feel bad about that at all. Of course, I'd feel better if I had some shouts and whiskey. Nobody sends me bottles of whiskey. Why is that? Sentinel Apologetics, he receives bottle of whiskey. Hmm. Hmm. interesting, but I'm not. My opinion on sand. I love it. I like sand. Actually, we'll go back to the end there. We'll take these last couple ones and call this the night. I'll take this one first, Vic M. Did my super chat go through? Yeah, you had one super chat that did go through, and I think we did answer this already. Yeah. Oh no, we didn't answer this. Sorry. There is a super chat left. Have you seen Galil's Facebook posts for his readings of the two of the Maro tablets? Oh, I don't know what he could have done to those. But Galil has become a real embarrassment. Wow. The Jerusalem tablet. I mean, everyone's still focused on the Jerusalem tablet. There is an update. I just got an update yesterday on this. A lot of scholars are now saying, I don't see what he sees. A lot of them are just saying, yeah, he showed us a photograph. He showed us his reading. We don't see how the two relate. Yeah, it's Galil's work is just, and now Peter van der Veen has just said, yeah, Galil and I just didn't agree on things. So apparently, there's that sort of unified reading. That ABR said that their epigraphy team was all agreed on wasn't so unified. This is getting bad. This is the whole Galil fiasco is getting really, really bad. It's starting to fall apart, and it hasn't even gone into publication yet. Peer-reviewed publication is he's just writing stuff now without even thinking about it. It's awful. And ABR is just right there with him, just saying that pretty much the same, just going, yeah, okay, we agree with Galil, but he's wrong on this. It's earlier, or it's the early date, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is just it's gotten cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It's really gotten strange. So I cannot even imagine what his readings would be like for the Mara tablets. And they're ostraca, really, not tablets even. They're ostraca. So, yeah. Let's see. I just saw that comment fly by. Tumentos Tui says, some tablet. I've seen clear, quote, letters on the chiseled inside of a limestone ossuary. It's probably no different. Honestly. When I saw that, there's no letters there. And frankly, it's on the inside of a block. It's just, oh my gosh. It's bad. I mean, it's really bad. Whew. Oh wow. Yep. Crazy stuff. It's just crazy stuff. So, yeah, at this point, Galil is striving for Petrovich levels of incredulity. Okay? He's striving for that level of being discredited. And it's sad. It's unfortunate that he's ending his career this way, but it seems like he's determined to end his career. Unfortunate again, but people tried to stop him. He is apparently very stubborn. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Sorry we missed it. We did make it right. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. Okay. And a couple more non-super chats, and then it is going to be a night. Did see a couple here. Take. All right. I'm going to take this one. What is your opinion of sand? LOL. I like sand. I think sand is clean. I don't mind digging in sand. You know, give me a pile of sand in Egypt any day of the week over Israeli mud. You dig in Israel, you're digging in solid mud. I mean, it's just caked mud. Digging in Israel is disgusting. Digging in Egypt is nice. You can sweep it away. You can shovel it. You can sift it. It's a very agreeable substance. I like sand. You can pick up, your hands are dirty. You can pick up some clean sand and you can rub it and you can, clean your hands that way. Sand is beautiful. I like sand. I don't like mud. Digging in caked mud is miserable. It's a miserable experience. Not as bad as tar. The tar is even worse. Tar, you need solvents, and solvents are just nasty and just, will eat your brain out eventually. But I really think that, I love sand. I think sand is great. I'd be a pretty bad Egyptologist if I didn't like sand. So anyway, that's my opinion of sand. I love sand. All right. And I'm going to take this one last question. And this is the final question of the night. Barring any last minute super chats, but this will be the last non-super chat. It's going to be from Brick Creation. Opinion of near-death experience. Okay. My opinion of near-death experience is that it isn't death. Okay. There has been many studies on near-death experience. Some of the things about near-death experience is that people have a different opinion of their near-death experiences 2 minutes after their near-death experience versus 2 hours after their near-death experience. A high percentage of near-death experiences 2 minutes after the patient is in extreme terror, exceptionally afraid. They have some horrifying experience during their near-death experience. 2 hours later, they'll report it's the most beautiful experience of their life. Very strange. The surgeons won't tell you what they hear after they bring somebody out of near-death experience. It'll curl your hair. It'll curl your hair. They will describe their patients describing just terrifying experiences of fire and torment and pain and agony, and how much, how horrifying it was. And then 2 months later goes, oh, I saw the light. It was so beautiful. So there is something about the human mind that just can't cope with that sort of experience. But we've recorded it enough now that we know that that's a common phenomena with near-death experience. Now, one of the things about near-death experience, again, is they're not actually dead. The neural pathways have not degraded. They're not actually dead. A lot of them are clinically dead. And clinical dead is not dead. Clinical dead is you've stopped respiring, your heart stopped beating, but the neural pathways have not started to degrade. Once your neural pathways degrade, that's it. You're dead. You're really dead at that point. There's no bringing you back. But it is one of those sorts of processes where, again, how much of this is experience that their mind is filling in here because it knows it's dying and it's trying to reconcile that it's dying. How much of this is the spirit and the body, having a disjunct? Basically the spirit understands that the body ain't working anymore and it's panicking. So, there's a lot of issues here with near-death experience that are still not quite well understood. Not only from, say, a medical perspective or a psychological perspective, but from a theological perspective as well. And I do think sort of this is one of those areas where, say, more rigorous thinking can really sort of play a role in, essentially. So I don't think this is one of those questions that can be answered empirically. It's one of those questions that's going to need to be answered in a more holistic, maybe a more retro kind of fashion, where we're sort of taking the phenomena, stepping back and asking what sort of body, human mind situation would make such a phenomenon even possible. So anyway, I think that sort of covers the super chat, or sorry, this chat, this question. Again, a lot of unknowns, a lot of things we do know. No, they're not really dead. We do know that they've gone through clinical death, but not neural death. We know that they experienced terror within the first couple of minutes of being back. They report that they're undergoing really terrifying experiences, and then their mind reconciles it to something beautiful, something lovely. And that's what we know about the phenomena at the moment. It will be something I will be looking into at some point and try to get some better handle on, but it's not something I've really looked at in a lot of detail yet. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Very much appreciated. Okay. I think we have covered all the super chats, and we've done a good spattering of the regular question. I think I did see his question. I think I just passed it by. But we don't guarantee that regular questions, non-super chats, get answered. Okay, so that is just something that we just don't guarantee that we do. So if it's a super chat, that's completely different. They've paid money for my attention. They're going to get attention. That's what, and that's what YouTube promises. I mean, YouTube basically says, when you're on a live chat, this is YouTube policy, the basically a super chat brings it to, say, the live streamer's attention, but the live streamer can choose not to answer it. Now, as on this channel, we try to answer every super chat that's, done in good faith. We've had only one that has not been done in good faith. So we try to answer every super chat that we can, because that's what they're paying for. Okay. We also try to do a good selection of non-super chats too, but we don't guarantee that everyone's is answered. Sometimes they are questions I just pass over, but and that's because it might have not hit me, as being an interesting question in the moment. I do make that as my prerogative to say what I answer and what I don't. And if we don't answer it tonight, feel free to post it next time. You know, and maybe I'll answer it, and maybe I won't. You know, and that's just the thing with non-super chats is there's no guarantees. We do make a good faith effort to answer a lot of them though, and that's the thing is we answer a lot of non-super chats, and we answered something like 8 or 10 of them tonight. We did answer a lot of them, so if we didn't get to you, there's always next week. So it's 11 o'clock. It's past 11 right now. We have gone for 3 hours. I'm tired. I'm actually kind of hungry. And my voice is giving out on me. So I am going to call it a night at this point. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. It was a great round of questions. A lot of excellent, truly excellent questions tonight. Some really, really fascinating stuff too. I want to thank everyone who gave us super chat tonight. You guys are really funding this channel, and you guys are really helping us. We couldn't do it without you. I mean, you are providing so much support for us, and you are making this ministry happen. So we are so appreciative of that. We also want to thank our regular subscribers who watch our videos, because without them, YouTube wouldn't promote our videos and make it available to others who aren't part of our current subscriber base. We also want to thank our Patreon subscribers. They do the thankless work of funding our... That wasn't a super chat, was it? Oh, there was one more. Okay, no, I did not see that. Oh, he did slip it in, didn't he? Okay, we got one more super chat. So, thank you for that, bringing that to my attention. Slim2K for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Opinion on Christians getting tattoos. Sin. Not really, but it was forbidden for Jews to do this under ceremonial law. Okay? This is one of those yes and no kind of deals. We have to kind of understand that tattoos in the ancient world were things it was marks you made on the skin to dedicate yourself to a god. Okay? So that's the context of tattoos in the ancient world. You're putting the sign of Baal on your skin, or the sign of Reshef, or the Egyptian, god Horus, or whatever. Okay, and we actually find some really tattooed people in ancient Egypt. There were priestesses that were heavily tattooed in ancient Egypt. And we're only discovering it now that we can take, say, photographs of pigments and do differentiation between, say, the blackened skin and the blackened ink. So, and we're finding how heavily tattooed some of these priestesses were. Some of them were really heavily tattooed. So tattoos in the ancient world were the sign of worshiping another god. So we have to keep that in mind. So with the tattoo in the ancient world had religious significance. Now, Christians getting tattoos, because it's part of the ceremonial law, it is one of those things that has been covered by Christ covering the Sabbath. So with that said, Christ as Lord of the Sabbath covers the entire ceremonial law. Because it covers all the entire ceremonial law, the provisions of the ceremonial law are also covered. That's the kosher laws, the mixed fiber laws, and even the tattoos. Now, with that said, is it a good idea to get a tattoo? Is an entirely different question. Is it sin? No. Is it a good idea? Not necessarily. And that's because tattoos still have cultural weight, even if they are not necessarily a sin. They're not necessarily wise. Some tattoos are harmless. Okay, you join the Marine Corps, you get your Marine tattoo after you graduate as a Marine. I know Marine Corps really dislike non-Marines getting Marine tattoos until after they become graduate Marines. But that doesn't prevent some new from doing that. Those tattoos are probably harmless. You know, division tattoos probably harmless. But there's places and cultures where tattoos are still verboten. Tattoos in Japan are a sign that you're a gangster, part of the Yakuza. There are onsen, basically public baths, where people with tattoos are forbidden. Okay. And that's because it has an association with organized crime. Should a Christian in Japan get a tattoo? Probably not, because you wouldn't want a Christian being associated with organized crime. In America, it has more of a memorial function. People get tattoos now because they don't go to priests. They don't have funerals anymore. They don't mourn the dead or celebrate life events in the same way, or loss of their pets. So they go to a tattoo artist to memorialize the important junctures in life that would have been, in the past, memorialized with ritual. Yeah, and then that, my wife raises a valid point, is in many cases we don't even have cemeteries anymore. In some places, cemeteries are cost prohibitive or just not available. So for many people, it is the only permanent ritual they can have. This is a sign of modern times as well. So again, this is going to ultimately boil down to the conscience of the Christian. Ultimately, whether or not it's a good idea. So that's my opinion on tattoos. It's not a sin. It's going to depend on your cultural context, whether or not it's a good idea. And then ultimately, it's going to boil down to the conscience of the particular Christian. So, thank you very much for the super chat. So, anyway, that is going to be our final question. Again, I want to thank all our subscribers who are basically supporting us. You guys were really, really generous tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We so appreciate the support and the help. I want to thank our subscribers who leave comments, likes, dislikes, and YouTube, by the way, treats dislikes exactly the same as likes. If you dislike a video, you promote that video. If you like that video, you also promote that video. So we really appreciate the likes and the dislikes. We also appreciate the comments and the interaction that we have with all our subscribers. And I also want to thank our Patreon supporters who basically are funding our equipment upgrades. We just bought a new microphone, so that as an equipment upgrade, and you Patreon supporters did pay for it, and we want to thank you guys. We really, really appreciate that what you do for us, because you are funding our channel to do better and more with our videos. So with that said, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in the live stream tonight. Very, very much appreciate your questions and your contributions. It was a great party, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Good night, everyone.